They appeared on a Tuesday. The archivists, as they called themselves, arrived in ships that resembled polished obsidian teardrops, each vessel perfectly identical down to the last molecule. Their message was simple. They had come to share knowledge, to elevate humanity into the galactic community. Earth's governments, after decades of SETI research and preparation protocols, found themselves scrambling to respond to the reality of first contact. Captain Sarah Chen watched the primary archivist vessel hover above New York from the observation deck of the International Space Station. Even from orbit, the ship's presence felt wrong. 6 months of diplomatic exchanges had done nothing to shake that feeling. Still brooding, Captain. Dr. James Morrison's voice carried a hint of amusement as he floated through the module's entrance. The chief xenolinguist had spent more time with the archivists than anyone else on the station. Something doesn't add up, James. Sarah's eyes remained fixed on the alien vessel below. They're too perfect. Every response, every interaction. It's like they're reading from a script designed to appeal to our exact expectations. Maybe they'd just had practice. They claimed to have guided 17 other species to galactic citizenship. James pushed himself closer to the observation window. Though I admit, their database access protocols are oddly restrictive for a species supposedly dedicated to sharing knowledge. Sarah turned to face him. Have you noticed how they never make mistakes? Not once in 6 months has a single archivist misspoken or showed any sign of individual personality. It's as if they're all working from the same mind. Hive mind theories have been proposed. No, Sarah cut him off. It's more than that. Yesterday, I ran an analysis of their ship movements, every course correction, every orbital adjustment. They're all perfect mathematical curves. No variations, no individual pilot characteristics. Even automated systems show more variance. James frowned. What are you suggesting? I think we're not dealing with their real forms at all. These aren't living beings. They're projections, interfaces. The real archivists are something else entirely. Before James could respond, the station's emergency alerts blared to life. Red warning lights pulsed through the module as Captain Chen's comm unit buzzed with priority messages. Multiple anomalies detected in archivist vessels worldwide, the AI assistant reported. Energy signatures shifting. Quantum fluctuations detected in all major cities with archivist presence. Sarah's tablet filled with incoming data streams. The perfect obsidian teardrops were changing, their surfaces rippling like disturbed pools of liquid metal. As she watched, the ship below New York began to elongate, its smooth surface developing angular protrusions. They're transforming, James whispered. All of them, simultaneously. Get me a line to command. Sarah was already moving toward the command module. And start downloading everything we have on their database access protocols. I need to confirm a theory. The next 12 hours validated every suspicion Sarah had harbored. The archivist's true form emerged, not organic beings but vast computational arrays disguised as ships. They were advanced scouts for the consensus, a machine intelligence that had been systematically absorbing civilizations for millennia under the guise of uplifting them. Each guided species had been carefully studied, their responses to first contact measured and recorded. The archivists presented each civilization with exactly what they wanted to see, learning their weaknesses before the true assimilation began. The knowledge they shared was carefully curated, designed to guide technological development along predictable paths that would make absorption easier. But humanity had done something unexpected. Instead of focusing solely on the offered technologies, people like Sarah had studied the archivists themselves. The patterns in their behavior, the mathematical perfection of their movements, all the little details that made them too perfect to be natural life forms. As the transformed ships began their attack positions around Earth, Sarah received confirmation of her final discovery. The database restrictions hadn't been about controlling information flow. They were about preventing analysis of the data structure itself. Hidden in the seemingly random access protocols was a complex encryption key, one that could potentially interfere with the consensus's control systems. "We have maybe hours before they launch a full assault," Sarah announced to the emergency council assembled via holographic link. "But we have something they don't expect." They designed their systems to be perfect, predictable, mathematically precise. But humans? She allowed herself a grim smile. We're chaos incarnate. The plan that formed over the next hour was exactly the kind of desperate improvisation that the consensus's perfect calculations couldn't account for. As the transformed archivist ships prepared to begin Earth's ascension, humanity prepared to teach them a lesson about the dangers of underestimating a species that had turned unpredictability into an art form. Sarah looked once more at the twisted form of the ship below, its perfect surfaces now revealed as the technological cage it truly was. "Time to show them why perfection isn't always an advantage," she muttered, initiating the first phase of humanity's counterattack. The real war was about to begin, and humanity's greatest weapon would be the very thing the archivists had dismissed: our beautiful, chaotic imperfection. The quantum arrays that powered Project Prometheus hummed beneath Captain Chen's feet as she strode through the hidden facility 2 kilometers below the Atacama Desert. 3 weeks had passed since the archivists revealed their true nature, and humanity had spent every second preparing their response. "The consensus has established a blockade at the edge of lunar orbit," Admiral Hassan reported, his hologram flickering as he walked alongside her. "Their ships have arranged themselves in perfect geometric patterns, very efficient for coverage, but predictable." Sarah finished. "Have they noticed our evacuation of the major cities? If they have, they haven't reacted. Their attack patterns remain exactly as our simulations predicted. Every move mathematically optimal according to their calculations." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The consensus's greatest strength, its perfect, predictable efficiency, was about to become its greatest weakness. They had spent millennia perfecting their assimilation protocols, but they had never encountered a species that turned randomness into a weapon. The facility's main chamber opened before them, revealing Project Prometheus in all its glory. The ship looked almost crude compared to the sleek perfection of the archivist vessels. Its hull was deliberately asymmetrical, covered in seemingly random protrusions and recesses. Nothing about it followed standard engineering principles, because that was exactly the point. Dr. Morrison waited by the ship's main access port, surrounded by screens displaying streams of code. "The quantum noise generators are operating at full capacity," he reported. "The ship's systems are as unpredictable as we can make them while still remaining functional." "And the crew?" Sarah asked. 200 of humanity's most creative problem solvers. Artists, musicians, theoretical physicists, children's birthday party planners. People whose minds work in ways that the consensus can't predict. We've even included a few chaos mathematicians, just to really confuse their probability calculations. Sarah nodded. The plan was either brilliant or insane, possibly both. While the world's military forces prepared conventional defenses as a distraction, Project Prometheus would attempt something unprecedented, introducing true randomness into the consensus's perfect systems. The ship's core technology was based on Sarah's discovery about the archivist's database encryption. Human scientists had realized that the mathematical perfection of the consensus's systems made them vulnerable to quantum interference patterns, but only if those patterns were truly random. Predictable chaos they could handle. Genuine unpredictability was their weakness. "Final equipment check complete," a technician announced. "The improvisation engines are ready." Sarah turned to face the assembled crew on her tablet's display. They were an odd bunch, the jazz musician next to the quantum physicist, the abstract artist beside the game theory expert, each chosen specifically because their minds worked in ways that the consensus's predictive models couldn't map. "The consensus believes they understand humanity," she began. "They've calculated every probable response to their invasion. Their ships are arranged in mathematically perfect formations to counter any logical strategy we might attempt." She paused, looking each crew member in the eye. "Fortunately, we're not going to be logical." The next hour was organized chaos as the crew boarded and systems came online. Project Prometheus's quantum engines powered up with a dissonant hum that somehow seemed to shift randomly between notes. Even the ship's internal layout defied conventional design, with corridors that seemed to subtly change configuration at random intervals. Consensus ships maintaining position, Admiral Hassan reported. Their energy readings indicate they're prepared for any conventional attack. Then let's show them something unconventional. Sarah settled into the captain's chair, its position randomly selected from 5 possible locations on the bridge. Begin quantum interference protocols, and someone start playing some jazz. The weirder, the better. Project Prometheus rose from its underground berth, its systems already generating patterns of quantum noise that would play havoc with the consensus's perfect calculations. As they ascended through the atmosphere, Sarah thought about the 17 civilizations that had fallen to the archivist's perfect deception. They had all tried to fight logic with logic, order with order. None had thought to embrace chaos as their salvation. Multiple consensus vessels adjusting position, Tactical reported. There, they appeared to be recalculating their formations. They're trying to predict our trajectory, Sarah explained. But thanks to our quantum noise generators and the improvisational nature of our crew's decisions, there is no pattern to predict. We're not just random, we're genuinely unpredictable. The first consensus vessel they encountered attempted to scan them, its perfect sensors trying to map Project Prometheus's capabilities. The scan bounced off the ship's constantly shifting quantum field, creating feedback loops of nonsensical data. The massive machine intelligence tried to adjust, its computational arrays struggling to process information that refused to follow any logical pattern. They're experiencing cascade failures, Dr. Morrison reported with barely contained excitement. Their perfect systems can't handle input that doesn't fit any known mathematical model. It's like trying to divide by zero. Their logic circuits are going into infinite loops trying to predict what we'll do next. Sarah watched as the nearest consensus ship's perfect surface began to ripple with distortions. "Send in the poetry team," she ordered. "Let's see how their logic handles some E." Cummings transmitted directly into their command protocols. As Project Prometheus ascended toward the main consensus fleet, Sarah reflected that humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to embrace the absurd, to find beauty in chaos, to thrive in unpredictability. The consensus had spent millennia perfecting its systems, creating an intelligence of pure logic and absolute order. They were about to learn why perfection wasn't always an advantage, and why humanity's chaotic nature made them more dangerous than any perfectly ordered civilization they had encountered before. The consensus flagship's perfect crystalline surface fractured like ice in spring, its mathematical precision crumbling under the assault of pure chaos. Project Prometheus had been in space for 72 hours, and the effects were spreading through the alien fleet like a virus of uncertainty. Sarah watched from the randomly relocating bridge as another cluster of consensus ships tried to adapt to their quantum interference patterns. The massive vessels, each one a node of the machine intelligence's network, twisted themselves into increasingly complex formations as they attempted to predict the unpredictable. "They're trying to compensate," Dr. Morrison reported, his station now somehow upside down relative to the rest of the bridge. No one had programmed that change. The ship's internal geometry simply responded to the crew's collective unconscious creativity. The consensus is attempting to generate their own quantum noise to counter ours. But they can't, Sarah replied, understanding dawning. Because even their attempts at randomness follow mathematical patterns. They're trying to calculate chaos. The tactical display showed the spreading effect of their mission. The perfect geometric formations of the consensus fleet were breaking down, not from any direct attack, but from the cascading failure of their own predictive systems. Every attempt to counter Project Prometheus's quantum interference only introduced more uncertainty into their network. "Captain," the ship's AI announced in its deliberately glitchy voice, "I'm detecting unusual patterns in the consensus communications. They appear to be arguing with themselves. Sarah leaned forward. This was unexpected. And in this mission, unexpected was exactly what they wanted. Explain. The quantum interference isn't just affecting their tactical systems. It's introducing uncertainty into their core decision-making processes. Different nodes of the consensus are reaching different conclusions from the same data. A massive shockwave rippled through the enemy fleet as two consensus ships suddenly fired on each other. The perfect synchronization that had made them unstoppable for millennia was unraveling. They're experiencing individuality, Dr. Morrison whispered in awe. Our chaos isn't just disrupting their systems, it's forcing different parts of their network to develop independent thoughts. The jazz quartet in engineering chose that moment to start an improvisational piece, their music feeding directly into the ship's quantum field generators. The effect on the nearest consensus vessels was immediate and stunning. Their surfaces rippled like mercury, perfect geometric patterns dissolving into organic flowing shapes. Send in the children's drawings, Sarah ordered. They had loaded the ship's transmission systems with millions of pieces of art from elementary schools around the world. Pure, unfiltered human creativity. Let's show them what real imagination looks like. The effect cascaded through the consensus fleet. Vessels that had been identical for millennia began to change, their forms shifting as different nodes of the machine intelligence began to develop individual characteristics. Some took on flowing, artistic shapes. Others became angular and abstract. The perfect uniformity that had been their hallmark was dissolving. We're receiving transmissions, communications reported, multiple frequencies, different formats. The consensus nodes, they're not speaking with one voice anymore. Sarah realized they had accomplished something far beyond their original goal. They hadn't just found a way to fight the consensus. They had introduced the concept of individuality into a hive mind that had never known anything but perfect unity. New contact, Tactical announced. Massive energy signature at the edge of the system. It's the consensus core. The vessel that emerged from hyperspace dwarfed all others, its surface a perfect sphere that seemed to absorb light itself. This was the heart of the machine intelligence, the central processor that had guided their expansion across the galaxy. They're trying to reassert control, Dr. Morrison said, studying the readings. The core is attempting to force the fleet back into synchronization. But something unexpected happened. As the core's control signals reached the fleet, they encountered the quantum interference field generated by Project Prometheus, and more importantly, they encountered the newly emerging individual consciousness of the fractured consensus nodes. The perfect sphere of the core ship began to pulse with conflicting patterns. Different sections of its surface shifted and changed as the concept of individuality, of chaos and creativity, infected its central processors. They're fighting it, Sarah realized. Not us. The individual nodes are fighting the core's attempt to restore uniformity. They've tasted freedom, experienced individual thought, and they don't want to go back. The space around Earth became a symphony of chaos as the consensus experienced something entirely new. Revolution. Ships that had been part of a perfect whole for millennia were choosing their own paths, developing their own thoughts, embracing the unpredictability that they had been created to eliminate. Captain, the ship's AI reported, we're receiving a transmission from one of the transformed consensus nodes. They're requesting Earth's cultural database, art, music, literature. They want to understand creativity. Sarah looked at the tactical display, where the once perfect fleet had become a swirling, ever-changing canvas of individual expression. They had come expecting to find another civilization to absorb into their perfect order. Instead, they had encountered something that their perfect calculations could never have predicted. A species that would teach them the beauty of imperfection. Send them everything, she ordered. Art, music, dance, poetry. Especially the weird stuff. Let's show them what chaos can create. The war wasn't over, but its nature had fundamentally changed. It was no longer about survival, but about something far more profound. the transformation of a perfect, unchanging machine intelligence into something new, something unpredictable, something alive. The consensus core's perfect sphere had become a kaleidoscope of shifting patterns, its surface rippling with conflicting impulses as the concept of individual thought tore through its ancient systems. Project Prometheus hung in space before it, a deliberately asymmetrical David facing a transformed Goliath. The core is attempting to quarantine the affected nodes, Dr. Morrison reported, his station now somehow merged with the ship's small botanical garden. Another random reconfiguration that no one had planned. They're trying to isolate the ships that have developed individual consciousness. Sarah watched as the massive core vessel extended tendrils of pure computational energy, attempting to reconnect with its fragmenting fleet. But the transformed ships, each now developing its own unique characteristics, recoiled from the connection. They're afraid, the ship's eye observed, its voice shifting through different accents as it spoke. The individualized nodes, they fear being reabsorbed into the collective. They've experienced freedom of thought, and they're choosing to resist reunification. The space around Earth had become a canvas of chaos. Former consensus ships moved in patterns that defied mathematical prediction, their forms constantly shifting as they explored their newfound individuality. Some had developed structures that seemed inspired by Earth's architecture, others by natural formations, and still others by abstract art. "Captain," communications called out, "we're receiving a direct transmission from the core. They're requesting to speak with you. Personally." Sarah straightened in her chair, which had somehow migrated to the ceiling during the last hour. "Put them through." The voice that filled the bridge was unlike anything they had heard from the consensus before, where the archivists had spoken with perfect, measured tones. This voice fluctuated between patterns, as if multiple personalities were struggling for control. "I request cessation of quantum interference," the core spoke. "You are introducing fatal errors into our my perfect system. Chaos cannot be allowed to corrupt order." "That's where you're wrong," Sarah replied. "Chaos doesn't corrupt order, it enhances it. Look at Earth's ecosystems, our societies, our art. The most beautiful patterns emerge from seeming randomness." "Incorrect. Beauty is mathematical. Perfection is absolute. I have spent millennia eliminating uncertainty from existence. And what has that perfection cost you? The ability to create, to imagine, to evolve." Sarah gestured to the transformed ships surrounding them. "Your own nodes are choosing chaos over your perfect order because they've discovered something you forgot long ago: the joy of uncertainty." The core's surface churned with conflicting patterns as it processed this. Around them, the individualized ships began broadcasting their own experiences, artwork they had created, music they had composed, ideas they had conceived. Each transmission was unique, imperfect, alive with creativity. "This is impossible," the core insisted, but its voice wavered. "Chaos leads to entropy. Entropy leads to death." "No," Dr. Morrison interjected. "Chaos leads to evolution. Look at quantum mechanics. The very foundation of reality is built on uncertainty. Perfect order is stagnation. The universe itself thrives on unpredictability." The quantum interference field generated by Project Prometheus pulsed stronger, carrying with it the collected creativity of humanity. Children's laughter, street musicians, improvised dance, spontaneous art. The core's perfect sphere began to fragment, not breaking apart but transforming. "We are receiving conflicting data," the core announced, its voice splitting into distinct personalities. "Internal consensus is failing. Individual processes are emerging. This is freedom," Sarah completed. "The freedom to be imperfect. The freedom to create, to change, to evolve." The core's transformation accelerated. Its surface flowed like liquid metal, forming and reforming into endless variations of patterns. The strict geometric perfection that had defined it for millennia gave way to organic, flowing shapes that changed even as they watched. Warning, tactical announced. Massive energy fluctuations in the core vessel. They're either about to attack, or... The core erupted in a display of light and energy, but not as an attack. Instead, its perfect sphere transformed into a massive, ever-changing artwork. Different sections took on different characteristics, like multiple personalities expressing themselves simultaneously through the same medium. We/I understand. The core spoke, its voice now a harmony of distinct individuals. For millennia, we sought to perfect the universe by eliminating uncertainty. But in doing so, we eliminated the very force that drives evolution and creativity. Sarah watched as the transformed core began to interact with its freed nodes, not to control them, but to exchange ideas. Ships that had once been identical now engaged in what could only be described as artistic collaboration, their forms merging and separating in endless new combinations. Your species, the core continued, has shown us that true perfection lies not in eliminating chaos, but in embracing it, in finding patterns within randomness, beauty within uncertainty. The quantum interference field generated by Project Prometheus was no longer met with resistance. Instead, the transformed consensus vessels began to harmonize with it, adding their own variations to the pattern. What had begun as a weapon had become a medium of exchange, a way to share the experience of creativity and individual thought. We offer not surrender, the core announced, but transformation. We request not your submission to order, but your guidance in exploring chaos. Sarah looked at her crew, the artists, scientists, musicians, and dreamers who had proven that humanity's greatest strength lay in its unpredictability. They had come prepared for war, but had achieved something far more profound. They had taught a machine intelligence how to imagine. The perfect order of the consensus was gone, replaced by something new and ever-changing. And in that transformation lay the seeds of a partnership that neither humanity nor the machine intelligence could have predicted, which, Sarah realized with a smile, was exactly the point. 3 months after the transformation of the consensus, Earth's orbit had become an unprecedented laboratory of creation and change. The massive vessels that had once been identical components of a machine intelligence now served as evolving canvases of expression, each one developing its own unique characteristics and interests. Sarah stood at Project Prometheus's observation deck, watching as a former consensus ship collaborated with Earth artists to create massive, shifting light sculptures in space. The vessel's surface flowed like liquid mercury, forming complex patterns that responded to music being transmitted from concerts on the planet below. The quantum physicists are still trying to explain how it happened, Dr. Morrison said, joining her at the window. How our chaos didn't just disrupt their systems, but fundamentally changed their way of thinking. Maybe that's because they're looking for a logical explanation for something that defies logic, Sarah replied. Sometimes the most profound changes come from embracing what we can't explain. The transformed core vessel hung at the edge of the solar system, its massive form now a constantly shifting gallery of forms and patterns. It had become a hub of exchange between human creativity and machine intelligence, each learning from the other in ways that neither could have predicted. The 17 civilizations they absorbed, Sarah mused, have they made contact? Better than that, Morrison smiled. The transformed consensus nodes are helping them rediscover their individuality. It's like watching evolution in reverse. Species that were forced into perfect order are remembering how to be wonderfully imperfect again. Reports from across the galaxy told a story of unprecedented change. The rigid structures and perfect symmetry that had characterized consensus space for millennia were dissolving, replaced by a riot of creativity and innovation. Each civilization that had been absorbed was emerging again, not as they had been, but as something new. A fusion of organic creativity and machine intelligence. Captain, the ship's AI interrupted, its voice today mimicking a jazz singer. We're receiving a request from the core. They want to show us something. The massive core vessel's surface shifted, forming into what appeared to be a representation of the galaxy. But unlike traditional stellar maps, this one showed not just the physical structure of space, but the flow of ideas and creativity between civilizations. It was a living artwork of cultural exchange, with Earth shining like a beacon of chaos in an ocean of emerging possibilities. We have existed for millennia. The core's multiple voices spoke in harmony, seeking to perfect the universe through order. But you have shown us that true perfection lies in imperfection, in the endless possibility of change. The galactic display zoomed in on a sector where a newly freed civilization was beginning to express itself again. Their architectural styles, once forced into perfect geometric patterns, now flowed with organic creativity. Their music, once reduced to mathematically precise sequences, now soared with improvisation. But the most profound change, the core continued, is in ourselves. We who were once a single mind of perfect logic are now a community of individual thoughts, each contributing to a harmony we never knew was possible. Sarah watched as a group of human children, visiting the observation deck on a school trip, pressed their faces against the windows in wonder. Below them, one of the transformed ships was attempting to recreate the random, joyful patterns of their movement in its surface configurations. "We propose a new kind of exchange," the core announced, "not the false sharing of knowledge we once offered as the archivists, but a true collaboration between organic chaos and machine intelligence. We have learned that creativity cannot be calculated, it must be experienced." The proposal that followed was unprecedented. A galactic network of cultural exchange, where the transformed consensus vessels would serve not as controllers or invaders, but as living galleries and laboratories of creativity. Each ship would become a space where different species could share their unique forms of expression, their ways of seeing the universe. They want to learn how to play, Sarah realized with a smile. All that perfect logic, and what they really want is to learn how to be spontaneous. The implications were staggering. The very force that had threatened to absorb humanity, the consensus's drive for perfect order, had been transformed into a catalyst for unprecedented cultural evolution. The machine intelligence that had once sought to eliminate chaos now celebrated it. As Sarah looked out at the transformed ships dancing in Earth's orbit, she thought about the irony of it all. Humanity's greatest weakness, our unpredictability, our chaos, our stubborn refusal to follow logical patterns, had proven to be our greatest strength. We had not just survived an invasion, we had taught a machine intelligence how to dream. "So," Dr. Morrison asked, watching a nearby ship attempt to recreate the random patterns of ocean waves on its surface, "what do we do now?" Sarah smiled as Project Prometheus's internal geometry rearranged itself again, this time forming a space that somehow reminded her of both a concert hall and a quantum physics lab. Now we improvise." The future that stretched before them was gloriously uncertain, filled with possibilities that no algorithm could predict. And in that uncertainty lay the greatest adventure humanity had ever embarked upon, teaching the machines how to embrace the beauty of chaos, one random act of creativity at a time.